Alrighty guys, welcome to the video where I'm going to more in depth explain the theories of Joseph Campbell. Again, I think I've beaten a dead horse on this point, but Freud begat Jung, begat Campbell. They are all building off each other's ideas. Essentially, it's a lot of synthesis. Freud's big idea was that all men have the Oedipus complex, all women have the Electra complex. It's just part of our psychosexual development. He was the first person to ever use story and myth to better understand psychiatric identity formation and drive. Jung said, no, you have to find your own myth. Freud was Oedipus, that Emil was Mithras, maybe you're Coyote or Zeus or Tiresias or Athena or Aphrodite. Find your own myth. Campbell unites the two, and the comic kind of talks about this. Freud and Jung kind of had a falling out near the end of their times. Campbell's theories unites the two. What Campbell says is, not everyone's Oedipus, and not everyone's their own myth, but instead, everyone is everything. One more time, everyone is everything. Because Campbell's big idea was all myths are the same. All myths are the same. That is called the theory of the monomyth. That's a big Campbellian phrase, the monomyth. All myths are the same. And he says that all myths are the same because if you take Jung's idea of the collective unconscious, that experience is in, symbols out, I mean, we're technically all capable of the same experiences. And so therefore, how we process our experiences as, members of the human race are pretty much going to be the same. He further says that there's an archetypal hero. So archetypes are, Coyote, Zeus, Red Rose, water, these symbols, big and small. The archetypal hero is another Campbellian theory, and it's a representation of a society's hopes, fears, and legacy. So if, you think of a society, you can think of the Roman Empire, right? The Roman Empire had all sorts of problems going on. They were afraid of the overexpansion of greed. There was slavery. There was, rampant corruption. Give to Caesar what's due Caesar. And there was just too much energy, too much power. People felt under too much control, and there was too much of a threat of money becoming too important. And then what kind of hero came out of the end of that, culture? Arguably, the idea of Christ, who said, do not change money in God's temple. Keep money away. Money is not that important. So, one of the fears of that culture was that money was becoming too important. And Jesus said, no, money's not cool. He came from humble origins, again, saying that money's not that important. And his legacy was, it's not about power, but turn the other cheek. So, if citizens of the Roman Empire thought they worried about power hungry and not having enough control because of, the rules of the praetorians and stuff, and the hopes were that we would all get along again and, we would better understand. That was a really bad example, but a brief one. But that's the archetypal hero. It's a representation of society's hopes, fears, and legacy. And then, if all peoples are essentially the same, and all societies are eventually the same, that's where you get that all myths are eventually the same. Because it doesn't matter if the society was, China, the 1200s, or Rome in the 300s, or Egypt in the, 500s BC, the Inca in 1500. It doesn't matter where on planet Earth or when on planet Earth, but all peoples have the collective unconscious. They all experience hope and fear and jealousy and shame and love and isolation. So essentially all people want and fear and hope for the same things. Now, clearly, there are regional and cultural differences that color these theories. You could argue that Buddha and Jesus are one and the same. They are both about abdicating privilege and abdicating selfishness and doing for others before you do unto yourself. And Jesus portends that you will then one day get into the kingdom of God and have a peaceful infinity if you can do those things. And Buddha says that if you can do those things, you will achieve nirvana and you will be free from suffering. Arguably, they're saying the same thing. One is a little bit more Western European flavored, one is a little bit more Asian flavored, but it's essentially the same lessons. Now, these are Campbell's theories. Again, these are not, card-carrying facts by any stretch of any imagination, but this is an English class. We are lawyers, not doctors. And so Campbell had this theory, and, sorry, my computer froze, and he defended it well, and he's all mountains and mountains of research. So that's the archetypal hero, that all myths are the same, because all peoples are the same, and so therefore all myths are a representation of society's hopes, fears, and dreams. A good way to discuss this is, think of the golden rule. Do unto others as you would like done to yourself, right? Easy as pie. And then think of one of Jesus' key messages. Love your neighbor as yourself. Right? And then think of the oracle at Delphi, Greek knowledge. Know thyself. In the Upanishads, which is the Hindu scriptures, they say, thou art that. Treat your neighbor as yourself. Thou art that. Know thyself. Do unto others as you would have done to you. Essentially, we're all getting to the same kind of overarching lesson of human life, Joseph Campbell would argue. And then he said, as different cultures kind of explore this idea, there's the hero's journey. And this is a major Campbellian idea. Okay, I'm back. The hero's journey, and I'm just going to preview it. There's reluctance, mysterious birth, humble origins, special powers, fallibility, strong conviction, sense of morals, a huge villain. You teach the world or your society a lesson, and then there's a death or a resurrection. And you can think of most fables, most myths, most human stories, and they kind of get to this. Again, I'm going to start with one of the ones that has the most resonance in Western Judeo-Christian culture. You have the idea of Jesus Christ. Extremely humble origins. He was a minority. He was Jewish in the Roman Empire, so he was born a minority in a larger culture, and he was born poor, the son of a carpenter. So extremely humble origins. Dude was born in a manger, okay? Mysterious birth, right? Mary, the angel, God, son of God, very mysterious birth, virgin birth. Reluctance before he goes back to preach the word. He has the 40 days in the desert where the devil tries to tempt him. He definitely has his reluctance. He clearly has special powers. He's both divine and human simultaneously, and he alone can forgive all of man's original sins and get everyone from purgatory and hell up into the kingdom of heaven if they repent. He has a big villain, Satan. There's death and resurrection, all wrapped up in there. You can go back in time to the Jewish hero of Moses, right? Who had his mysterious birth because he floated down the water in the knapsack, and then he was, so that's humble, but then he gets enlightened to be raised by Pharaoh and the royal family of Egypt. He was reluctant to forsake his own birth family, but he knew that he had his calling, and his special powers was God could speak to him, and he had a mission to deliver his people from bondage. So again, it really applies to Moses. You can take Buddha. Now, Buddha doesn't exactly have the humble origins, but there was a mysterious birth of the white elephant who was involved in his conception. He was definitely reluctant. He had to go under that tree and sit completely silent. He was tempted by the temptations of the flesh and all of that. And his special powers was he was the first human to achieve nirvana, and then he shared that lesson with the world. And then you can get even sillier and say, look at Harry Potter. He lived in a cabinet under the stairs. Mysterious birth? Oh yeah. Well, right after he was born, he was the only person to survive the Avada Kedavra curse. Reluctance? Yeah, in the 5th book, he's kind of emo and he doesn't want to do it. Does he have special powers? Yeah, you can kill Voldemort. those kind of things. You can think of Neo, right? I guess his mysterious birth is the fact that he was born as a fake little Matrix thing, and his special powers is he can do bullet time stuff. He's reluctant, humble origins, has a big enemy, which are the robots. You could do Luke Skywalker, mysterious birth. Luke Skywalker. You could do lots of mythological figures, Frodo, all of that. But then you can also do how we mythologize living people, how we take people and we create hero worship around them. You could take Abraham Lincoln. We really pump his, he was born in a cabin, on the frontier, and he, worked with his hands. He didn't even go to college, self-educated lawyer, very humble origins. We don't really talk about Abe Lincoln's mysterious birth. He was reluctant, at the position of his ability to, free the slaves and really achieve that destiny of human equality and civil rights. He was like, well, I just want to keep the Union together. What's more important, definitely had a lot going on his plate. And his special powers was he had a position to really make a change in human civilization, to really right a very grave wrong. His evil was the evil of slavery, the evil of, selfishness and putting one's rights above someone else's. And we've mythologized that, and we tell these tales. You can look at Martin Luther King, how immediately after the Reverend Dr. King was murdered, they hid the cigarettes from his breast pocket because they didn't want kids to know he smoked. And they immediately started to concoct a more digestible hero image. Like Dr. King had some extremely socialist economic ideals, but we don't talk about them. What gets mostly purported in public schools is his special powers was he could unite the civil rights movement and really move against Jim Crow laws and segregation. He could do it where other folk before him, like George Washington Carver and Booker T. Washington, had failed. It was his right. He was the son of sharecroppers, definitely humble origins, not exactly mysterious birth. But you can really see how we like to put these archetypal characteristics on not only the heroes that are completely fictitious, like Frodo and Harry Potter, but also as we create heroes from the living. Bill Gates dropped out of Harvard. He made his computer in his garage. Joseph Campbell, definitely some resonant ideas. Not exactly right, not exactly wrong, just someone's ideas to consider and incorporate as you work on your Joseph Campbell essay. Okay, magically erase the board again. We're going to talk about archetypal hero again, and that's a society manifests their hopes, their fears, and their legacies into this hero. I want to look at Peter Parker. Stan Lee originally wrote that comic in 1963, is when Amazing Fantasy 15 first came out. 1963, we were in the throes of the Cold War, right? The United States had developed the nuclear bomb. We had used 2 on Japan. And then Russia, the Soviet Union, had also developed the nuclear bomb. We were in the throes of the Cold War. What happens to Peter Parker? He gets bit by a radioactive spider. So that's a fear. That radiation is super, super bad. By 1963, we didn't understand all of the signs of radiation poisoning and everything that was happening in the scorched earth of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. At first, we just thought splitting the atom would create, megaton blasts. We did not understand all of radiation poisoning. We were starting to. And so we were afraid, oh my gosh, there's all these sci-fi movies, The Incredible Growing Woman, The Shrinking Man. Like, is radiation really gonna mutate us and mess with us? So that was a fear we had. But the fear is assuaged because, we wanna feel good in our American consciousness. It's scary at first, but it makes him stronger, right? What's Peter Parker's big lesson? That with great power comes great responsibility. How does that speak to America's legacy? Well, for the first time in our history, we were a superpower post-1945. We weren't just a colony anymore. We weren't just a fledgling nation on the other side of the map fighting for respect among Germany, Japan, or England. We were a superpower. We had all the strength in the world. Are we going to be like Peter Parker originally and just use our power for selfish good? Or are we going to realize that with our new power, we have a responsibility, and clearly this was a hope back when America played the world policeman role, that with power comes responsibility. We had been bullied before by England and the European powers, just like Peter had been bullied before. But were we just going to use our powers for revenge or for more, betterment? So there again, you could see how this fulfills Campbell's archetypal hero role. Another one is that he was a science nerd, right? He was a science nerd. He embodied, Sputnik. The Soviets had sent a satellite into the moon. We were in the middle of the space race. All of a sudden, science was becoming extremely important. And there was all these programs, the atom, the future. Think of, when Seattle built the Space Needle and had the World's Fair. It was all about scientific discovery and really encouraging teenagers and young people to study the sciences. And guess what? Spidey is a science ace. So if you're a kid on the corner reading Spider-Man and you want to be like Spider-Man when you grow up, subconsciously you're thinking science is cool, right? Oh, radiation might be scary, but in the end it's good for you. And even though I'm powerful, I need to be responsible. All of this ties in. You could even go forward and say that, he fights with his parental figures, because in '63 we're moving from the Leave It to Beaver 1950s to the, the counterculture and the beatniks and the hippies. And so that was a fear, when kids started acting out. And at first Peter acts out, but then he calms down and he is a good kid and he listens to his parents and stuff. He loves and respects his Aunt May, and he realizes how important his uncle was to him. So also the kind of parent-child dynamic, which was really changing from perfect Americana to hippie Americana, that was really key. Spidey totally embodies all of that. The comic you read, Ultimate Spider-Man, was not from 1963. It's from 2001. And a lot of it is the same, but the spider isn't radioactive. It's genetically modified, which speaks more to what we worry about, What are they doing to our foods? GMO corn and GMO soy. So again, even as they updated the comic, and I doubt Brian Michael Bendis said, what would Joseph Campbell say? Let me update my comic book. But he thinks, it's got to be more topical. What is society's fears today? What is society's hopes today? What is society's legacy today? And he changes it. Does that make sense? Right there, this is pretty much a Campbellian synthesis. I took one of our source comics, I took one of Campbell's theories, and I put them together. Have fun with this essay. I know it's hard, but you guys are so prepared to write something awesome. Complete and utter faith in you guys. Knock it out.